Hi guys, Olive here. It's that time again. It's time to talk about my favorite fiction books of the year. Very briefly, before we get started talking about the books, I wanted to give my yearly disclaimer that these are the books that I read in 2020. They weren't necessarily published this year, although a number of them were, and this list is ranked. I will start off by talking about my 10th fiction favorite of the year, and I will work my way up the list until I conclude with my favorite fiction read of 2020. Actually, I'll really be starting off this video by talking about my 10th and 9th favorite fiction reads of the year, because those two books are in the same series. Magpie Murders and Moonflower Murders, both by Anthony Horowitz. As the titles of these books suggest, these are both murder mysteries, but with a really cool bookish twist. The main character of both books is a publisher by the name of Susan Ryland, and when we first meet her at the beginning of the first book, she has just received the manuscript for what is going to be the final book in a very popular mystery series that her publishing house puts out. When she gets to the end of the manuscript, though, she discovers that there's a missing chapter at the end. She thinks it's a simple mistake, but when she rings up the author with whom she's worked for years, she finds out that he has died very suddenly. Maybe it's just because she's been publishing mystery series for such a long time, but she can't help but feel that the missing chapter and his death are in some way connected. That may sound pretty standard for the plot of a mystery novel, but what you might not expect when you pick up the first book in this series is that it's essentially a story within a story. Horowitz didn't just write a murder mystery surrounding this deceased author with Susan Ryland looking into the case. Oh no, he also wrote the manuscript that Susan Ryland was reading. So it's two novels for the price of one. Not only that, but these books are done in such a clever way. Anthony Horowitz created the character of this late author. We never actually get to meet him ourselves, but he's all over both of these books because his murder mysteries are in these books. Apparently, he was a real piece of work. Susan Ryland has some very entertaining stories about him. This late author really enjoyed playing word games. He did it mainly for his own amusement. He was kind of condescending. He liked to put himself above his reader in that way. So he didn't do it for the best reasons, but it's still a lot of fun because there are lots of plays on words. There are allusions, there are anagrams, there are lots of little things within the book that if you're looking out for them, they can help you get to the answer. The second book in this series, Moonflower Murders, was just very recently released, and it has that same formula going on, but it's not quite as good as Magpie Murders. I still loved it. I still thought it was a winner. It just wasn't quite as good. And for that reason, Moonflower Murders is number 10 on this list, and Magpie Murders is number 9. Moving up to number 8 is a YA book. It's my favorite YA book of the entire year. It is based on Bolivian culture, history, and politics. It's called Woven in Moonlight by Isabel Ibanez. This is the story of a decoy queen standing in for the exiled queen of their people in order to keep the real queen safe. But when the queen is summoned by the king of the opposite faction, the interloper sitting on the throne in their former city, Jimena, our main character, has to go in her place. So many different things happen to Jimena when she's in enemy territory, and in order to let her people know what's going on, in order to communicate with them covertly, she has to employ a magical power that she has that involves weaving. I won't say too much about those parts, but I thought they came to life so amazingly. This book was directly up my alley. I absolutely loved it. I actually reviewed it very shortly after I read it toward the beginning of this year. If you would like to hear more about this book, I will link that review for you in the description box below and up in the cards. This year, I really made an effort to incorporate more romance books into my reading diet. I had started to get into romance just casually over the past couple of years, but this was the year that I really wanted to dedicate myself to getting into romance. I wanted to shake off any snobbery that may have been lingering in my subconscious and just allow myself to enjoy some good romance books. I read about one per month, And so I read 12 great romance books this year, and my favorite one of the bunch comes in at number 7. It's To Have and to Hoax by Martha Waters. This book is set in the Regency period, and it follows an estranged husband and wife pair. They were deeply in love when they got married, but there was some sort of a rift that happened early on in their marriage. We don't know exactly what happened, at least when we start off, but we know that they've been living separately for years now. There's an opening event in this novel where the wife, Violet, is mistakenly led to believe that her husband, James, has been critically injured. She rushes to be by his side, but when she finds out that he's just fine, she's relieved, but she's upset that she worried for no reason, and she's very upset that she had to confront the fact that she still cares about him, even just a little bit. Violet decides that she wants to take revenge on her husband for making her worry and for making her realize that she still loves him by pretending to come down with consumption or tuberculosis so that he can worry and know what that feels like. He knows right away that she's faking, and they just play games with each other throughout this book, avoiding the issue that happened between them in the first place, until eventually they have to confront it. I think I loved this one in particular so much because it knows precisely what it is and does it well. The writing is so incredibly clever. The dynamic between the couple felt really authentic. It is not an easy road to forgiveness because these two are at each other's throats at the beginning of the book. The side characters are really interesting. They have significant and unique roles and their own personalities. I just love this book. I actually did a full review of this one as well. It was my first ever review of a romance book, which was pretty exciting for me. So if you'd like to hear more details about this book, if you'd like to hear me break it down a little bit more, I will link that review video for you in the description box below and up in the cards. The number 6 spot on this list belongs to the one and only Edith Wharton for her book, Summer. This was one of 2 different Edith Wharton novels that I read this year. I'm working my way through her back catalog and I'm having a great time doing it. I knew that this book was probably going to be on my year-end favorites list within the first 2 pages because even in that short window of time, I felt completely surrounded by the setting of this book. This is the story of a young woman who is the unofficially adopted daughter of the lawyer in a small town. She's really bored, and so one summer when a young architect comes into town, she becomes very intrigued by him. The two kick off an affair, which has some pretty big consequences for the rest of her life. Every single time I read an Edith Wharton novel, I'm just amazed by her skill when it comes to telling a story. She creates these complex, dynamic, deeply flawed characters, and you can tell that she knows them entirely before she even puts pen to paper. And then when it does come time to put pen to paper, she uses very sparse but very intentionally chosen language to paint a scene. It's just incredible. This book is somehow relaxing and tragic at the exact same time. Before reading this book, I would have said that such a thing would be impossible for an author to achieve, and she does it flawlessly here. Moving into the top half of this list, number 5 will look very familiar to you if you've been around BookTube this year, because I also very much enjoyed Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. You very well may already know the plot of this book because it has been discussed quite a bit here on BookTube over the course of the year, but just in case you don't, I will summarize it very quickly. This book follows a nanny in Philadelphia who is asked by her employers to come over in the middle of the night and to take their toddler out of the house while they deal with an incident. The nanny and a friend of hers who happened to be with her when she received this call decide to take this little girl to the grocery store down the street, where they're just kind of roaming the aisles, playing games, killing time until they can take this little girl back home. Well, while they're there, a white woman tips off a security guard in the store, letting him know that something might be amiss because 2 black women are there with a white toddler. The resulting confrontation between our main character, Amira, and this security guard is caught on the cell phone camera of a bystander, and this video is Chekhov's gun as the story progresses, ready to go off at any moment. The majority of the rest of this book is about Amira's relationship with her employer, but also a boyfriend that she gets involved with. As a lot of other reviewers have noted, there are a number of political statements within this book, but I also found the entire book to be kind of a warning about who we allow to get close to us and what they're looking to get out of the situation. This book was pretty much destined to hit the mark with me because I myself have been a nanny at various points in my life, and the relationship between Amira and the little toddler girl she nannies for, her charge, was so authentic to what that experience is like. I just loved it. I thought this book was really smart, well written, very current, and definitely worth all the hype. At number 4 on this list is a very dark book, The Lonely Hearts Hotel by Heather O'Neill. This is about 2 orphans in Depression-era Montreal who bond at the orphanage where they're both kept and abused as children. They're forced to separate as teenagers, but they come together later in life to form a traveling circus. But I should definitely let you know that I feel like that summary plus this cover combine to give the sense that this book is whimsical, when that is not at all the case. There is some magic and some lightheartedness in this book because both of the main characters are performers, and they use their talents to escape the misery that surrounds them. But the majority of this book is extremely gritty. As long as you're ready to read about some grim and highly disturbing stuff, this book is incredible. It completely sucks you in. I found it impossible to not fall for these 2 main characters who just absolutely refused to let the tragedies in their past define them. I completely and totally fell under this book's spell early this year, and for that, it's in my top 5. Spot number 3 on this list belongs to a book that I just recently finished, The Ensemble by Asha Gable. This book is about a string quartet that forms when the 4 of them are in graduate school, and the book covers nearly their entire career as an ensemble, and during that time period, all the stuff that happens in each and every one of their personal lives and within their relationships with one another, which are all very complex. I will admit that I picked this book up specifically because it reminded me a lot of one of my favorite novels, The Interstings by Meg Wolitzer, and I found that the 2 definitely did share a lot of similarities, but what surprised me was that the writing of this book, the elegant simplicity of it, reminded me a lot of my all-time favorite book, Rules of Civility. And because there was so much in this book that felt familiar to me already, I was able to sink into this book basically immediately. I felt right at home with the characters. I loved pretty much everything about it. There's really nothing I would change, except I would really like if it would have been twice as long as it is. And given my love of brevity, that means a lot coming from me. All right, moving into the top 2. Next up is Writers and Lovers by Lily King. This book follows a 30-something-year-old woman living in Boston in the 1990s. She's waiting tables in order to support herself while she's trying to finish her first novel. And during this time, she's also grieving the very recent loss of her mother, and she's attempting to choose between 2 different men who would offer very different futures for her. This book is very subtle. There's not a whole lot going on plot-wise, but I thought it was absolutely gorgeous. All the quiet power, the attention to detail, the concise and very deliberate writing that I loved about her previous book, Euphoria, is definitely on display here. I was very happy that I got to give this one a rave in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I will link that review down below if you'd like to hear more about this. And then finally, my top novel of the year is The Signature of All Things by Elizabeth Gilbert. This is essentially the entire life story of a botanist who was born right at the turn of the 19th century. Her father had a very successful botanical business in Philadelphia, so she grew up with a love of plants, especially mosses. Like with Writers and Lovers, the plot of this book doesn't seem all that complex when you put it out there like that, but there's so much more going on in this book. There's so much more depth than it appears like there might be just on a surface level. The main character of this book, Alma Whitaker, is this complicated, deeply flawed, but in the end, highly admirable character. I loved getting to see her grow up, get to see her make mistakes and learn from those, and just generally learn more about the world over the course of her life. This book very quickly became a new all-time favorite for me, and that does not happen every day. I reserve those books for really the best of the best, and I would consider this one of those. I was certainly predisposed to love this book because of how much I love nature writing, but Gilbert does such a tremendous job with this book. I loved it so much that nearly immediately after I finished it, I felt compelled to do a whole review video for it. I will link that video for you in the description box below and up in the cards if you'd like to hear me talk a little bit more about this. So those were my favorite fiction reads of 2020. Generally speaking, it wasn't the greatest fiction reading year that I've ever had, but I can tell you that I loved each and every one of the books on this list, and I feel so grateful that I got a chance to read them all this year. If you have any comments or questions for me regarding anything you've seen in this video or about anything in general, please feel free to put those in the comment section below. But if you would prefer to connect with me somewhere other than YouTube, I am on a variety of different places on social media, and the links to all of my profiles will be in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.